Welcome to the Screener College Basketball Podcast with your hosts, Mike Randall and Gus Kearns.
Welcome in, listeners, to the Screener College Basketball Podcast, where we're always talking everything college hoops. You could have been anywhere else on the dial, but you chose to be here with us, Mike and Gus. We appreciate that. And today we're going to continue our team preview series for the upcoming college basketball season. And we're going to talk some Alabama basketball. And we brought in Nick Kelly of the Alabama Tuscaloosa News. Nick, thank you so much for joining us. How's everything going on your end?
Going well, just getting ready for the basketball season. Of course, football is going on right now too, so it's chaotic time of year. You know, November is going to be quite the month, but it's a fun chaotic.
Of course, thank you for stepping aside from what's happening on the gridiron on the football side to chat some Alabama hoops. So we totally appreciate you kind of shifting your mindset and sidestepping over to college hoops, which is upcoming. Don't forget to give Nick a follow over at _Nick Kelly, capital N, capital K. And of course, you can find his things over at tidesports.com. So please go ahead and give Nick a follow over there for everything Alabama, whether it be football or basketball. Nick, last season was like kind of a breakthrough year for Coach Nate Oates and your program. It was a fantastic voyage. And I think this season kind of fits the mold of last season, where we're thinking about like changed expectations. So do us a favor, catch us up on some of the freshmen and some of the transfers that are going to come in. We adored that, Jordan Brunner and Ivy Titan found success within your program last season. So catch us up on the newbies, who are going to be some of the new faces inside the Crimson Tide uniform.
Yeah, some of the biggest ones. Now they have a freshman coming in, Davison, a top recruit who's going to be a guard for them. Some real excitement about him. Going to take some time to develop, of course, just because he's a younger guy, but he's a guy who could be a human highlight reel kind of guy for them, and he just has abilities to make some big plays. And so it'll be really interesting to see how he does. Nate Oates has spoken highly of him. Of course, again, there's things to work on, but I'm very interested to see how he does and does in the early portion of the season for Alabama. So that's a big name to watch. Charles Betiaco is another freshman who he's about 7 feet tall, which they need that length and that size because they don't have a lot of guys like that. This is a team that is a bit smaller, a little bit more guard-centric. And so to have a guy like that who's a big rim protector is going to serve them well, and they're going to need him to step up for them this season. And that brings me to another guy coming in. This is a transfer from Furman. Noah Gurley is another big that they need to be performing well for them because, again, they don't have a ton of size. They don't have a ton of bigs. And so he's another guy who is going to need to perform well. And early reviews are that, he's going to be able to fill a role for them. And we'll see how that all plays out in terms of how they organize their lineup.
Well, we are fans of mid-majors here on the podcast, obviously. And then we've been following Noah Gurley for a little bit, and he put up unbelievable stat numbers and lines last year for that Furman team. So he's a really interesting player as far as skill sets and then what he can do on the floor for your team. So I think he's going to fit in perfectly to that Brunner role that he played last year, but maybe even with a little bit more offensive diversity. Now, Nick, I need some help. Please help me. What player is more likely to play at an All-America level for your squad? Is it going to be Jaden Shackelford or is it going to be Javon Quinterly? I mean, that question alone has to be pleasurable for all Alabama fans to hear and hear your response to. Please remind the listeners what Alabama brings back on this roster.
Well, it's a good question. I think both could have great seasons, and both guys will be leading this team most likely, just based on last year, to their top players, and two guys who already have been voted to, getting some recognition early in the season. They were both all SEC preseason picks from the media and the coaches. And so, two guys who high ceilings, and we'll be interested to see kind of what they end up doing for Alabama. But I don't know if I can pick one. I mean, it's tricky. And I mean, Quinterly, I think has a shot to be really good. Shackelford too. It's just, they serve different roles, and so it's. I don't mean to not answer it. I just don't know who's going to have the better season. But Quinterly is that point guard. He's the guy who can push the floor like Nate Oates likes, And Jaden Shackelford is a guy who offensively he's always been pretty good, but defensively he's coming around as well, getting better on that end as well. And so, yeah, we'll see. I mean, I don't know if there's going to be a who's better or who's not, but 1A, 1B, I mean, they're both expected to be really good players for this Alabama team.
That answer of 1A, 1B is the perfect diplomatic answer, and I think Alabama fans will definitely respond to that, no doubt. All right, let's take a look inside your iconic league, Nick. The SEC, it's loaded with history. It's got unbelievable coaches. It has NBA talent up and down, the rosters on multiple teams, multiple programs. So which league matchup do you think is going to allow us to view if this season's roster for Alabama and the equation that Coach Oates and his coaching staff has put together is going to yield success similar to last year?
Well, I think you'd start with Kentucky. And most years this would be a good barometer to see where things are at, but the team should be pretty good. I picked them to finish first in the SEC. Or at least I should say in my first poll, I picked them at Alabama. Now, Alabama could surpass them. It's just a matter of, okay, let's see where things go. But, yeah, Kentucky brought in some serious talent. Perry, I mean, it's Kentucky, and so maybe they're going to get the benefit of the doubt, kind of like Alabama football would in a lot of cases, going into a season where you haven't seen them play yet. Arkansas should be a good team. A tough non-conference slate, too, so we might have a pretty good idea of how good this Alabama team is and isn't by the time conference play.
That's a great comparison and leads us into our next question. Loaded is an understatement for, Alabama's non-conference schedule. I mean, Coach Oates has really loaded this thing up and has really gotten after it and said, like, look, even if we are pedestrian inside the SEC, we're going to make sure that we give ourselves opportunities prior to that. So what game or two do you think you have circled for Alabama prior to SEC play? And it's just a stacked schedule. Like, dang, it's loaded.
It might be one of the toughest schedules in the country, honestly, because one of the prime games I look at is Gonzaga. I mean, that's going to be quite the matchup when Alabama heads to the state of Washington to play Gonzaga. And the crazy thing is that is the same day as the SEC championship game for football. And so it might be quite the day of sports for Alabama fans. But yeah, I mean, that's going to be a great test with Drew, with Chet Holmgren. I mean, there's some serious basketball players on that team. But I mean, they've got Baylor, they've got Houston, they've got potentially Kansas in Orlando. I think that could be a matchup there. So I mean, they're going to see some really quality teams. But for me, it starts with the Gonzaga as a matchup. I'm very interested to see how that plays out.
Well, if your preseason, non-conference schedule includes three of the previous season's Final Four teams, like you just outlined for us, that has to be one of the toughest schedules going. And you're correct with Gonzaga; they have studs up and down the lineup, old and young, and you want to see that push of pace and see kind of who pulls in front there. But then also you have Baylor and Houston who are going to attempt to muck it up. Baylor has a little bit more length this season, so obviously they're going to go back to one of those like 1-3-1 zones so they can play that with their length that they really like to do. And then we know Houston likes to slow it down and value possessions. So I want to see Alabama's push versus those two teams. I think that's going to be really interesting, and I think that's going to help tell the truth on just how talented and how successful this Alabama team is going to be moving forward. And then I guess before we get you out of here, I believe we need to have a prediction from you. Okay, Nick, this is like a new and different playing field for Alabama hoops this season with Coach Oates. We can talk Sweet 16. We can talk Elite 8. I mean, Final Four last year. You guys got some buzz for that as well. What's the case this particular season? What's the vibe and what's the chatter going into, preseason practice? And then, what are the expectations?
Well, this is a team that it's going to be a lot different than last year's team just because they lost a lot of talent. And so to me, it's like, yeah, taking that next step, but also it's going to look a lot different. So in terms of, okay, what is this team going to be like? Again, we're going to find out about that through the non-conference schedule, through the SEC schedule, about what this team's all about. it's hard to say. Like, it's not like they brought a bunch of guys back and, okay, now we're going to build on that. Maybe like a UCLA kind of does with like, okay, they have a lot of guys back, and so they're going to build on that. You're not maybe going to see that as much from Alabama just because they have a fairly new roster, and they're bringing back some key guys, but they lost some key guys too. So, but all that being said, I don't know if it's that out of the question to say, yeah, they'll get back to where they were the Sweet 16. They could get to the Elite Eight. And now my bold prediction was Final Four, but that might be a little bold. And so I'm going to maybe go right in the middle there with they improve on the Sweet 16 appearance, and they're going to make it to the Elite Eight this year.
Well, I think you just made some Crimson Tide fans' day right there with your prediction. The fact that they're going to replicate or maybe even exceed last year's success that they enjoyed, because the buzz around your program was among the highest or among the busiest of anything in college basketball. So I bet there's going to be a lot of smiles down there.
Yeah, well, if I could predict the future, I'd probably be doing something for some high organization, but considering this is my conjecture, I don't know if Crimson Tide fans want to take that to the bank, but I think this team could have some serious intrigue, and even though it's a totally different team, I think Nate Oates is starting to get a formula down in terms of how to win and how to have successful basketball teams here.
Yeah, we follow Nate Oates obviously up at Buffalo, and of course we can reflect back upon that Buffalo win over Arizona when they had DeAndre Ayton and kind of thumbnail that particular moment and be like, yeah, okay, he had something figured out as far as playing position as basketball and pushing the pace and making sure everybody can handle the ball. So that makes perfect sense. Hey, if you like what you're listening to and you enjoy the kind knowledge-dropping guests on the pod, just like Nick Kelly, please don't forget to give him a follow over at _Nick Kelly, and please follow his things over at Tide Sports. Don't forget to give the podcast a follow over on the Twitter machine at SDS Podcast, efficiency of keystrokes, of course, and maybe leave a kind review for our guests just like Nick on your podcast consumption vehicle of choice. Nick, good luck with the end of football season and the transition to basketball, and I bet there'll be some scoreboard updates at the football game for that Gonzaga-Alabama game. What do you think?
I'm sure there will be, and of course Alabama has to get to that game first, but Auburn could be a little tricky in the last game of the season. And so, it's not a guarantee that Alabama is in Atlanta for that game, but if there is, it's going to be quite the day. It's a good thing I juggled at one point, and maybe I need to practice my juggling skills again. So,
nothing wrong with brushing up on your circus skills. Thank you so much, Nick. We totally appreciate it. Please spread some kindness and support Nick's way this season. And Nick, hopefully we can catch up later on this season and talk some SEC and some Alabama basketball. Thank you so much for giving us some time here. Cheers, cilantro, gratulazia, arigato. Seat in the vans, and the cozy in the candlelight.